when you're researching your presentation, these can be fantastic. You know what that is? That's a sticky note. And I go through a ton of them, and I recommend you do as well. The reason is, as Steve Jobs said, he said, we tend to go to analog too quickly. You tend to take out Keynote or PowerPoint, and you begin writing in PowerPoint. And there's something about that where it just seems more serious. And even though you can move slides around, it seems like it's more serious and stuck than when you're writing on these. So one of my best recommendations, take out a bunch of these. They're cheap. Write down all of your points and just make it brief. The other nice thing about this is you can't be very long with it. Just write out your points and then stick them all over. And then look at it, step back and look at it and say, does that make sense? Because you don't want to just have bullet points. You want to have them grouped. You want the bullet points to be grouped into a series that makes sense. And you can move these around, and you can move them around and move them around. And then after a while, hopefully it starts to have a structure that makes sense to you. You know? And so these then are about this, and these then are about this, and these then are about that. Because so often, I'll tell you, I've seen so many presentations that are just bullet point hell. It's a slide, 8 bullet points, a slide, 8 bullet points, a slide, 8 bullet points. And you can tune back in 45 minutes later, a slide, 8 bullet points, a slide, 8 bullet points. And we all just go to sleep. By doing this with your sticky notes, you put them all out and then you go, okay, now what if these things go together, right? And you begin to group them then by these are all together and these are all together and these are all together, and then those sort of lead to your structure. And that way you end up without without all these bullet points, you might end up with 3 main points. And then point 1 and some things that fit under it, point 2 and some things that fit under it, and point 3 and some things that fit under it. So that might make more sense. And then you might not, at the end of the day, you might not be able to remember everything that happened in this entire presentation, but you might remember the 3 main points. And you might remember that they made sense and they were supported by some pretty good points. For instance, it's a kind of a silly idea, but if you had to give a presentation on chocolate is good for you, right? It's not a bad idea. Chocolate is good for you. And you get everything you can and you put everything out on the sticky notes and you've got it all over your kitchen table. And then you start looking at it and you go, okay, well, actually, all of these are chocolate is good for you health-wise, all right? And all of these are chocolate is good for you mood-wise. It will improve your mood, or it will help. It will, you know, actually they say chocolate mirrors the same chemical reaction that happens when you have when you're in love. Okay, so it may be a social thing or a mood-enhancing thing, and then it may also be a social thing where chocolates are given at certain times of the year and they mean certain things. So then you might have chocolate is good for your health, chocolate is good for you mentally, and chocolate is good for you socially. And those are your 3 main points. Rock on. Now that's a lot easier for me to remember when we're done than for you to have 50 or 60 points and you just bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, and at the end of it you go, oh my gosh, I'm just exhausted from all the bullet points. But better than that, if you're doing chocolate is good for you, then you might come up with a story for the first one, and a story for the second one, and a story for the third one, and they'll connect back to your story. For instance, you might say, chocolate is good for you, and I know this because of the 3 women in my life that I love more than anything. My mother ate chocolate, and it helped her health. My wife, that's the way I wooed her when I first met her, was I gave her chocolate, and that helped our relationship. And so it was good for us in that way. And then my daughter goes to these parties where everybody brings chocolate, and they have chocolate parties. And everybody comes there with chocolate, and everybody has such a good time. So I tell you a story about my mother and her health with chocolate. I tell you a story about the romantic things with chocolate concerning my wife. And then I talk about my daughter and how she uses chocolate as a thing for social thing. Right? And then with those 3 stories, you have a really good chance that at the end of the day, you're going to remember those 3 things, and you're going to remember those 3 benefits, and the bullet points support that. So don't go sit at your desk and start making a PowerPoint slide. Begin with your bullet. Begin with sticky notes. Stick them out there, move them all around, throw some of them away, come back and find additional ones if you find you need some more. But don't sit down. You know, one of the biggest mistakes I think I see is that PowerPoint ends up driving the speaker instead of the speaker driving and the PowerPoint being there to help. And the way this happens is you got it on a slide, so you feel like you have to talk about it. And if we were just talking, like I am now, if you and I are just talking, then I'm soliciting feedback from you. I'm looking at you and saying, did you get it? Are you understanding? And this could take a whole different, it could take a whole different tact, because you and I are just talking and I'm presenting. But if I have PowerPoint, then all of a sudden that tells me, hey buddy, you're supposed to be here. This is where you're supposed to be. And it's very difficult not to have PowerPoint drive you. I saw a really good speaker, and he was presenting and he was rocking. It was one of those days when he was just on. Everything about him was working, and his audience was responding, and he was telling a story. I remember it was a story about a lady in the red dress, and she got caught on one of these escalators, and her foot got caught, her heel of her shoe got caught in the escalator, and everybody was sitting forward, and we were all listening and laughing at the right points. And then he looks up at his PowerPoint slide deck, and he realizes he's not supposed to be there. He's supposed to be talking about the 3rd R of leadership, or whatever the heck it was. And he stopped the story short, and he went back to his PowerPoint slide. He allowed that PowerPoint to be in charge. And that's what I'm going to encourage you not to do. PowerPoint will help you in a couple of instances, but don't let it drive. And the best way to do that is don't start PowerPoint until the last possible minute, so that it's supporting you and not you supporting it. Thanks for your time. I'm always interested to hear what you have to say about this. Please let me know. I'm glad to hear your comments.